Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us in our discussion on the Ukraine, a very, very important subject for all of us. I think we all understand that the situation in the Ukraine is deplorable. But I want to ask you a question before we begin. The initial question is, have the people of Ukraine inspired you? Has there been something within them that has spoken very softly to you? We'll come back to that later. We understand that there have been many deplorable situations in life, certainly such as slavery, as we've had in America for over 400 years, and the Holocaust, and many, many, many attempts at genocide. On a personal note, anytime that I would see a movie on slavery, something within my stomach, honestly, something visceral would simply react. This isn't right. What are we doing to another human being? I'm sure many of you have felt the same way at times. When I watched the movie Schindler's List, a movie about the Holocaust, viscerally, I just felt this isn't right. This is not who we are. The same with the Ukrainian situation, the bombing and the deaths. These are not who we are as people. We are surely capable of so much more. But this deplorable situation, not only of past events, but our present event, they are happening. And what is happening is that human beings are making these things happen. Human beings are doing these things to other human beings, as they've done in the past and are doing now. Some of us are causing suffering for many of us. With this reality in front of me, I felt that we need to explore a broader understanding of the energies involved. Thus, I'm going to be sharing with you a possible way of viewing these seemingly deplorable situations in life. You, of course, will have your own opinion, which I certainly respect. And I trust that my remarks will not be offensive to any of you. I truly mean that. These remarks hopefully will not be offensive to anyone. What I'm simply trying to do is to give you another way of looking at things. You be the judge, as only you can be. It will take me some time to develop these thoughts, so please be patient, bear with me. You might want to take some notes. I look forward to your responses, and I value them as we try to understand this situation better. Let's begin with a concept that many of you are familiar with, but perhaps not to the depth that I will now present to you. The concept is duality. But let me begin just with a few questions. Have you ever wondered why you often root for the underdog? It's a good question. Why do you root oftentimes for the underdog? Why sometimes you maybe say to yourself, life is not fair? Why do you want good guys, good ladies to win? Why do you root for them to win? And why do you sometimes like vigilante justice in a movie such as The Equalizer, and I think the TV series are the same, where someone is equalizing injustice in life? It all begins with the notion of duality. There are three forms of duality which you know, and I'm going to share them with you here this evening. By duality, we sometimes mean opposites or contrast or polarities. Human life, to be a human, is to have your life filled with duality. Let me explain. First, there is physical duality. It's the easiest thing to understand. Physical duality. There's hot and cold. There's black and white. There's health and sickness. There's young and old. There's distant and near, fast and slow, male and female, life and death. These are just the many, many ways in which we experience physical duality. I know you understand that, physical duality. But there are two more forms of duality that are very important. And again, let me ask that you mute your microphones, please. The second form of duality is mental duality. Mental duality, such as right and wrong, good versus bad, mature versus immature, socially acceptable versus socially unacceptable, short-term goals versus long-term goals. In all of the sayings, such as the early bird gets the worm, nobody is perfect, to err is human, and to forgive divine. There is simply mental duality in addition to physical duality. And then there is emotional duality, the feelings that we have. Happy versus sad, scared versus hopeful, joyful versus depressed, content as opposed to being upset, clear as opposed to being confused, doubt versus certainty. And then there are the two big ones, the two big emotional life experiences, love versus fear, and acceptance versus rejection. I want to say this again. The two big, enormous emotional life experiences are love versus fear, and acceptance versus rejection. I suspect you've had a few of these in your lifetime. Now, here is the teaching that is very, very important for us to understand. And I feel that it is this teaching that will give us a better understanding and explanation of the Ukrainian invasion. When one incarnates, when one becomes a human being, one incarnates into duality. One accepts the fact that they will experience both sides of physical duality. They will experience both sides of mental duality. And they will experience both sides of emotional duality. When you incarnate, part of the game of duality is that you will experience both the positive and the negative aspects of duality. This is so very important to understand. It all begins with duality, the system into which human beings incarnate. Now, there are 5 other factors that need to be considered. Each one of them adds both a complexity to the situation, yet also a clarity for understanding. All 5 of these things make it more complex and yet more understandable. First, in addition to experiencing both sides of duality, one realizes that they are an eternal soul. This is absolutely vital. The notion that you are an eternal soul that has many lifetimes as a human being is vital to the understanding of one's life. You are much more than a one and done human situation. You need to reflect on this for a moment. You're much more than a one and done human situation. You are an eternal soul. Now just reflect on this for a moment. You can't experience all the aspects of duality in one lifetime. You can't have the full dualistic experience in just one lifetime. You can't be both male and female at the same time. You can't be both Asian and Native American at the same time. And you cannot be a majority and a minority in the same lifetime.
Recording in progress.
What is very, very, very important, and again, I'm going to ask you to please mute. What is very important is to understand that it is the soul. It is the soul that is experiencing all of the aspects of duality. That the soul experiences all the aspects of duality one lifetime at a time. It's your soul that experiences the lifetimes of human incarnation, but it can only do so one lifetime at a time. Unless you see yourself as an eternal soul, the present lifetime will make little sense, especially if one is suffering at the moment, as are the Ukrainian people. What would really be senseless is if one's present human lifetime is all there is. That would really make the Ukrainian situation seemingly meaningless. When you can view each lifetime as one lifetime of the soul, which has many lifetimes, of which many are quite pleasurable, then the present human lifetime, the present human lifetime, whether in Ukraine or where you are right now, is the soul's experience of fear and rejection or love and acceptance. Wherever you are, you're either experiencing fear and rejection, love or acceptance, and the larger experience of duality. Now, of course, each one of us continues to be very compassionate to the Ukrainians, but we also see that the Ukrainians are experiencing one aspect of human duality from the soul's eternal series of lifetimes, as we all have. Such an overview takes time to absorb, but at least it gives us a meaning to an otherwise senseless view of a one and done human lifetime, which is filled with seeming untimely suffering and death. You have to see it from the eternal soul understanding. The second consideration. A second consideration is that one experiences their life not only as an individual, but also as a part of a collective, as part of a larger whole. You know this. You have a collective of your family, collective of society, perhaps of religion, nationality, and this is so important, and the collective lifetimes are also subject to duality. The collective lifetimes are also subject to duality. Sometimes being the more powerful, sometimes being the powerless. Sometimes the collective is the majority. Sometimes it's the minority. Sometimes it's the dominant ones. At other times, the subservient one. It is obvious that the collective experiences duality as individuals do, whether it was the event of 9/11, or years of slavery here in America, or how India was ruled by the British during Gandhi's time, or how the Romans treated their conquered people, or how even general religions of the world condemn people to hell. This notion of the collectives, sometimes being dominant and sometimes being beset upon, was brought home to me when an author suggested that the Jewish Holocaust had a previous collective experience, and that this experience was mentioned in the book of Joshua. The book in Joshua, recalling how the Israelites were led to their promised land after several hundred years of being beset upon in Egypt. I decided to read the book of Joshua to see what was presented there. Again, trying to see things from a collective, dualistic perspective. The evidence was quite compelling. In the book of Joshua, chapter 6, on the fall of Jericho, when the walls came tumbling down. As the horns blew, the people began to shout. When they heard that signal horn, they raised a tremendous shout. The wall collapsed, and the people stormed the city in a frontal attack and took it. They observed the ban by putting to the sword all living creatures in the city, men and women, young and old, as well as oxen, sheep, and asses. Chapter 11, Joshua. At that time, Joshua, turning back, captured Hazor and slew its king with the sword. For Hazor formerly was the chief of all those northern Canaanite kingdoms. He also fulfilled the doom by putting every person there to the sword, till none was left alive. Hazor itself he burned. Joshua thus captured all those kings with their cities and put them to the sword, fulfilling the doom on them as Moses, the servant of the Lord, had commanded. The Israelites took all the spoil and livestock of the people they put to the sword until, this is a hard word to read, they had exterminated the last of them, leaving none alive. And then just a little later on, for it was the design of the Lord to encourage them to wage war against Israel, that they might be doomed to destruction and thus receive no mercy, but be exterminated. That's a very powerful, powerful passage. The phrase that occurred most often was leaving no survivors, and especially the notion of exterminating the peoples. The author suggested that the kings of the Palestinians reincarnated later in life, one of whom was Hitler, with the determination to exterminate the Jewish people. But how many other situations there have been attempts at genocide, the collective being attacked, just as we now have the Muslims in China. Which now brings me to the third point of duality, karma. You know the law of karma. It is the law of human moral behavior. What you sow is what you reap. You can see how easily karma fits the notion of duality. If you sow dominance, you will then be dominated individually and collectively. If you sow dominance, you will be dominated individually and collectively. Now, of course, we don't like to hear these words from a human perspective because we want to justify our righteousness in our present lifetime. That's why one has to at least be open to understanding the notion of duality experienced over multiple lifetimes. The experience of duality over multiple lifetimes, both individual and collective. Again, we want to be right in this lifetime, as limited as this view might be. It is only from a dualistic soul level that we can make sense of the Ukrainian situation, both individually and collectively. Let me say that again. It's only from a dualistic soul level that we can make sense of the Ukrainian situation, individually and collectively. There are two more considerations. You will have to decide if they apply to you. The fourth consideration, well, who started this game of duality in the first place? Actually, you did. Well, I don't remember doing so. That's because it was thousands of years ago. Well, if I did start the duality, or was at least involved with it, why would I do such a thing? Because you could. It was a new and exciting experience for you. Why do you do anything in life? Because you can. Even scary, risky things. Well, who was I then? Good question. Actually, at the time before you decided to become a human being, at the time before you decided to incarnate, you were a non-physical spiritual being. Let's just call you an angel, a non-physical spiritual being. You were fully conscious, just as you are now when you are aligned with your God source. And you were absolutely kind and loving, which you still are when you are aligned with your God source. That at the time, you were moved to have a new experience and you decided to become a human being as they were known at the time. So you lowered your vibration, your consciousness, and you decided to incarnate, to enter a human body. It was quite uncomfortable to squeeze your angelic nature into a physical body, but it was quite fun, exhilarating, at least at the beginning, because it was a new experience. And that's what souls do. That's what souls do. They experience. In fact, in truth, they are the experiencers of God, even in duality. Everything was good at first until you began to experience duality. Remember, to play the earth game, you had to agree to play the game of duality to the hilt. couldn't pick and choose. Either you were in duality or you were not, which eventually became the game that we now know as separation. You lost more and more of your angelic qualities the more you entered into the lower vibration of the physical, mental, and emotional duality. Your vibration went down. Actually, after centuries, but quite frankly, probably after millennia of doing so, when you had played the game of separation duality to the hilt, which you now are understanding, you made the decision to end the game, and you have decided to return to your angelic nature, which became complicated because now you had a body. I don't remember any of this. You will. You will. And perhaps you already have, which is the fifth consideration. The fifth consideration is the ending of the game of duality. Not the ending of being a human being, but the ending of duality. Not the ending of being a human being, but the ending of duality. Well, it still seems to me that the whole world is still unconsciously trapped in duality. Just consider the Ukrainian situation and all of the conflicts in the world, here in America and in the Middle East. It is true that many people are still experiencing the game of duality in a human body, unconsciously. But you are not. You have ended the game. At least I hope you have, both individually and collectively. You better explain this, Vince. I'm happy to do so. Even though you have a body with mind and emotions, you are a human being in one sense. You have elevated yourself into a non-dual spiritual consciousness. You've elevated yourself into a non-dual spiritual consciousness as a soul spirit. You have once again remembered that you are an eternal soul. You once again remembered that. You have remembered that you really are a spiritual being, having this human experience, and not just that human being that has periodic spiritual experiences. Many of you, many of us have remembered our eternal soulness while still in a body. We are above dualism. We've entered that game because we could. The Course in Miracles calls it being above the battleground. Being above the battleground. The battleground is the duality when you don't remember who you are. That's the battleground. When you are immersed in duality without remembering who you are. You are no longer caught in the battleground. We call this non-dualistic state by many names. Alignment is a good one. But so are consciousness, awareness, and presence. You are becoming again your angelic nature in a physical body. Now remember, I said that you have arisen above duality, which means you can accept the experience of others who are still experiencing duality, who are still playing that game, who have not yet remembered their angelic eternal soulness. Do you understand that? Because you have risen above duality, you can understand those who are still caught in duality and have not yet quite returned to their angelic eternal soulness. Vince, are you saying that the Ukrainian invasion and similar situations are simply the many people who are still playing the game of duality? Yes, that's precisely what I'm saying, but with a twist. You have realized the foolishness of such a game. And more people of the world seem to be agreeing with you. Here's the twist. In fact, many would say that the Ukrainians are making a collective sacrifice to lift many other people out of the lower energies of duality. In fact, the Ukrainian sacrifices are really an advanced group of souls who are calling attention once again to the foolishness of lower dimensional duality. I believe the Ukrainians are leading humanity forward, whether they know it or not. Do you remember the question I asked you right at the very beginning? Have the Ukrainians inspired you? One last comment. The Ukrainians are doing it also with their bodies. They realize that they aren't their bodies, and they can seemingly suffer and even die. But I believe either they know or we know that they are eternal souls, and they have a larger collective role to play. In fact, again, are they not inspiring you? I'll stop here for questions and comments, although there is much more to say, both about our past and about our futures, both as individuals and as collectives.